Good morning, everyone. I am Elizabeth Schwan-Rosenwald. I'm the Chief Programs and Network Officer here at Points of Light, and I am so delighted to welcome you to this morning's webinar and conversation. We're here today to talk about the overlap between economic sustainability, disaster response, and community resiliency. Our panelists will particularly focus their comments on those communities experiencing inequities and the challenges that face in creating resiliency. I'm so pleased to say that we have a real diversity of audience this morning, including NGOs, philanthropy, educational institutions, corporate, and government. So we have the full social sector with us, and we're so pleased that you were all able to take the time and join us today. I want to give my thanks to all of our panelists and our moderator, and I particularly want to thank Harumi Kachi, who is joining us late into the evening in Japan, and we are so grateful to have her here and her expertise. A few housekeeping notes. At the end of today's program, we will open up for a Q&A. During that time, you may either post your questions in the chat, and I will share them with our moderator, or you may go off mute. We'll give you the permission at that time and ask them directly. We want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask these fantastic panelists some of your questions. And with that, I'm extremely pleased to turn it over to Rob Glenn, Vice President of Global Resilience at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, who's going to lead today's conversation with our great group of panelists. Rob, thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Elizabeth, and thanks to all of you for joining from wherever you are around the globe. As Elizabeth mentioned, not all of us are waking up, and this is a morning meeting, so this is a meeting that's exceptionally late in the day. I'm very pleased to be here and moderate the panel. For those that are not familiar with the U.S. Chamber Foundation, we're the 501c3 affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and our mission is to harness the power of business to create solutions for the good of America and the world. We partner with the business community to anticipate, develop, and deploy solutions to challenges facing communities to expand opportunity, resilience, and prosperity. For more than 20 years, the Foundation has responded to disasters of all kinds and humanitarian crises around the world. Year-round, we also provide resources to small businesses to help them better prepare for the unexpected and build resilience to recover more quickly. We've seen what happens when a major disaster strikes a region, the toll it takes on the individuals, families, and businesses that reside there, and the way it exposes and underscores any pre-existing inequities. Disasters are always about people. Investing in economic mobility is critical for a community's ability to not just bounce back, but bounce forward following a disaster and build the resilience needed for long-term growth. With us this morning to talk about this important topic is Kadir Harris, Senior Director of Global Responsibility at Matterport, Harumi Kachi, Executive Director of HandsOn Tokyo, and Joe Ruiz, Vice President of Social Impact at the UPS Foundation, who leads UPS's Health and Humanitarian Relief Program. I'll ask each of you to please introduce yourself and share some insight as to why this topic matters in your work. Harumi, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, good morning and good evening to you all. I'm Harumi Kachi, the Executive Director of HandsOn Tokyo. HandsOn Tokyo is based in Tokyo, Japan, and serves as a bilingual platform to match the real needs of our community and volunteers. And we have 5 focus areas: children in need, youth in need, senior citizens, special needs community, and environment. We create projects based on the needs and involve volunteers to serve those needs. We execute over 1,000 volunteer programs annually and hold many events to raise awareness of each of the focus areas. And we have 3,000 registered volunteers, and half Japanese and half non-Japanese. And we've gone through many disasters. And today I look forward to sharing those with you. Thank you.
And Kadira, could you give us an overview from Matterport?
Sure. So I'm currently head of global responsibility at Matterport. We use 3D technology to enable anyone to turn a space into an immersive digital twin. Personally, I've had the privilege of sitting in a number of seats in the corporate social responsibility space. So at my core, I like to think of myself as a builder. I've been in this really unique position of coming into roles charged with constructing or reconstructing the work. And I've always placed equity at the center. So I've worked for Fortune 500 companies such as Allstate and CVS Health. I've also worked for NGOs, and I'm currently in the tech space. It was my disaster response experience at Walmart that really sparked my interest in this space. So Walmart is the largest company in the world, and I was charged with leading global disaster response and preparedness. Interestingly enough, during my time there, in addition to leading some of the record tornadoes and hurricanes, I was also charged with leading the company's philanthropic response to COVID, and I helped shape the $100 million commitment to racial equity. So when I was considering shifting and going to a much smaller company, very intentionally at Matterport, to build the CSR efforts from the ground up, I was drawn to the possibilities of leveraging the technology to enable anyone to access a space. So when I think of, just this topic that we're talking about today, this intersection of community resilience and disaster response and how it impacts economic sustainability, my first reaction is to pause a little bit. Because for communities that are under-resourced or disenfranchised and therefore going to be disproportionately impacted by disasters, I think it's important to ask ourselves, what was the condition of the community before the disaster? Did they actually truly have the resources, right, in place to support the community during blue skies? The answer is probably not, right? Were they thriving or even barely surviving before the disaster? So how likely is it that the community has the appropriate structures in place to withstand or prevent loss of services due to some sort of unplanned event or disaster? Again, probably not. And so what I challenge each of you to think about as we're having this conversation, and even as you're thinking about your own strategies and questions that you might have for us, is instead of thinking about how we can return the community back to the way it was before the disaster, how do we create conditions so that the community is better than what it was before the disaster ever happened? So that is really why I'm passionate about this work. I'm constantly thinking about how do we make communities thrive, not just get back to surviving the way that they were beforehand.
Thanks for that perspective. Joe, what's on your mind this morning?
Well, thanks, Rob, and I want to thank Points of Light, and it's an honor to be here with this esteemed panel. What I want to share today is, I have the privilege of leading UPS's health and humanitarian relief work as the vice president of our social impact at the UPS Foundation. And, UPS has been, when you talk about economic sustainability, we've been around for 116 years. The foundation has been around for over 70 years, focusing on community strengthening through our health initiative, which focuses on health and humanitarian relief, equity and economic empowerment, local community engagement, and planet protection. So this topic is very top of mind for what we do every day. What we try to do at the UPS Foundation, and why this is so important to me is, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina some years ago, when you think of all the stakeholders in a community, all of those stakeholders, from our very own employees to our customers to the communities that we serve, were so impacted, and everybody wanted to help. And so you had this sort of disaster within the disaster of trying to figure out how to help communities in the immediate and then in the long term towards recovery. And as a result of that, the foundation has developed a very strategic plan on how we will respond, who we will partner with. And what I've seen over the years is, frankly, this, at least across the private sector, is this need to respond to a certain set of stakeholders to respond immediately. But what we sometimes fail to do is plan for the long-term recovery to make sure that those communities are able to recover and put mechanisms in place to do so. So, and we saw nothing more epic over the last 3 years than the global pandemic, which I think calls into question all of the topics that we're talking about today: disaster response, community resilience, and the impact on economic sustainability. Because we know that everybody was affected, but not everybody was affected equally. And so, you know, from a UPS perspective, we want to work with our communities, not only in the immediate. UPS helped to deliver over 100 billion vaccines around the world to stem the immediate crisis. What we've seen in the aftermath is a significant number of the population, especially in middle and low income countries, that stopped all their vaccination programs. And now we've shifted to trying to help the 70 million children who have been called zero-dose children, have not had one basic vaccine that we take for granted. And we're working to help vaccinate those kids, leveraging our global logistics. And so, again, Rob, I just turn it back over to you to say that this topic is very important to UPS, and we work with many of the partners that I see that are on the call today, and will continue to do so.
Thanks all of you for your introductions. And just as a way of transitioning, you know, from the Chamber Foundation standpoint, this is something Kadir brought up. Understanding the context of risk is really important, and that helps you identify the clear actions or the clear opportunities you can take as an NGO, as a government, as a company. And you've got to build those effective relationships and partnerships to deliver on those programs. And lastly, you need to be able to adapt, because as you look at, as Joe mentioned, the last 3 years, you know, the disasters, you know, used to seem to have more of a cyclical process. Now it's more cascading. The cascading effects are more prominent across sectors because the effects are cumulative. So you have disaster stacking on top of disaster. It could be a man-made event, and then that's exacerbated by a natural event. And then if you look at things, particularly from a climate standpoint, the rapid intensification of Hurricane Otis into Acapulco was was, you know, overused term now, but it's unprecedented. We live in an area of unprecedented disasters. We also are living in an era where those living in poverty are facing an exacerbated income discrepancy. And after disaster, when you have those pre-existing conditions, it really becomes catastrophic for those people that don't have the resources that many of us are fortunate to have. Typically, recovery costs about 3% of an individual's income, but if everything is taken away, that's 100%. At the same time, annual income is sometimes reduced by more than 20% after disaster. So I want to talk about some of the key barriers to those in low-income areas, and what they face and ways of potentially helping them. Disasters destabilize communities. You know, from a FEMA standpoint, where I came from recently, we looked at community lifelines, and we looked at how we could equitably deliver programming to help everybody in the whole community. As we're looking at alleviating that impact and also addressing some fragile economic infrastructure as well as physical infrastructure, especially in communities experiencing inequality, I'd like to ask Kadir to share her perspective around how you've worked with several companies overseeing disaster response, social impact, and how you really build effective cross-sector and multi-organizational disaster response and resiliency efforts, so that those that have fewer resources are able to be helped by those that have the resources.
Absolutely. So I like to think of it as seating around a kitchen table, and everyone at the table has this unique but equally important role to play. So I think we need to focus on collaboration and move away from, sometimes what becomes power dynamics or power struggles, right? Where, typically the entity that's holding the purse strings. Let's move away from that and really think about how does each stakeholder coming to the table leverage its core strengths to impact the community in need? So NGOs, corporate funders, government agencies, emergency management, whatever your role is, what is it that you do really, really well? What's your sweet spot? Is it mobilizing volunteers? Is it the feeding and sheltering? Is it leveraging your supply chain? Is it writing the check that's going to fund? Start there. Then I ask or would ask, who's missing? Usually it's the community that's missing from the discussion at the onset, right? We tend to bring the community in once they're impacted. Okay, tell us what you need. But I really encourage, and again, getting to the heart of equity, bring those residents, bring those community members to the kitchen table as part of your strategy and planning. Simply bringing them to the table after the fact is not enough. And again, this is really going to require those of us who have been in power, when we think about, again, writing those checks or having, the scale to mobilize or create programs. It's going to require us to take a step back a little bit and allow the community to lead the discussion. So this is definitely a shift. Remember, we can write those big checks. We may have the infrastructure to do some really big things in the community, but if they are not receptive, if you haven't built strong relationships with a community partner that's there on the ground to help execute, and definitely if you show up in an insensitive way, okay, if you don't know that community, you're going to fail. And then think about the reputational impact, among other things, that's going to happen. Another thing that I think is important is, how does a community or organization involve its employees? So keep in mind that your employees oftentimes make up the community that might be potentially impacted. They may be personally impacted. Their home may be destroyed. They may have issues rebuilding, right? And so I've worked for companies that have created employee support funds, right, to support resources to those employees that are in need. Depending on the scale of your program and the resources that you're able to invest, you can get creative and think about how other departments, you can pull them in and scale your efforts around response or resiliency. I think regardless of the type of organization that you are, again, around this kitchen table, think about how your employees can also be involved in volunteer opportunities or connection points to the community. So often, especially with a disaster, your employees want to get involved. So provide those outlets from the start. Think about how you can get them involved and be a part of the solution, even if it's not a part of their day job.
Thanks for that. Couldn't agree more about being proactive and recognizing the core competencies that companies have to deliver good, but also there's two things just as a takeaway from your comments, Kadira, is focusing on the community first and being part of the community. That's just good business as well as good disaster management. And then as you think about business continuity as well as taking care of your employees, you need your employees and associates if you're going to deliver value every day. So you can deliver value in terms of what you normally deliver, but also deliver value from a disaster resilience context as well. Joe, UPS is known for its immediate disaster response. Could you build upon Kadira's comments and give us some insight as to how UPS makes some investments in long-term community sustainability and how this contributes to greater resiliency before disaster strikes?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, and I was nodding my head yes to just about everything Kadira was saying. So fully agree with all of her comments. But again, I mentioned Hurricane Katrina, which was sort of a launching point for when you think of UPS. We're in every community around the world, 220 countries and cities. So every disaster is local for us. It's very personal for us, and we try to leverage our superpowers to do whatever we can to provide the critical life-saving support. But beyond that, we realize that we can't just respond to disasters. It's really important for us to be a leader in mitigation, preparedness, and resilience. So we make a broad set of investments in pre-positioning supplies, working with the UN logistics cluster, working with the U.S. Chamber for over a decade. We've worked on efforts to try to make communities and small businesses more resilient. And we have a set of tools that currently sit on the U.S. Chamber Foundation's website called Resilience in a Box that try to help small businesses. I think one of the things in terms of our employees that I'm most proud of is that a lot of times when we see disasters, the key to us is making sure that we provide job continuation, even after Hurricane Katrina, for instance, when New Orleans was essentially underwater. We provided, continue to provide that pay for our employees. And then when we talk about long-term ongoing sustainability, I think everybody who's on this call in some way, shape, or form is aware of the current war on talent and the need, whether it's in the private sector or any sector, there just aren't enough people to work. And I truly believe that jobs are a conduit to economic sustainability. We see that when disasters hit recently in Maui, for instance, a resort community that relies on people to work in those hotels, to work in the tourism industry, and their homes have been lost. And so how did they continue to survive without a job? So I think what we try to focus on is, and what we're really proud of, we hire over 500,000 people a year. But whether you're in the private sector or the nonprofit sector, I think one of the things that we all need to focus on is how do we upskill our youth? How do we get youth ready and prepared to work? And how do we provide opportunities for them to create a pathway to self-sustainability, community sustainability? Those are really critical elements and something that we're really focused on with our equity and economic empowerment initiatives, both training people on entrepreneurism, supporting entrepreneur businesses through various public-private partnerships, through our Women Exporters program, helping small businesses to scale, but also making sure, again, that they have the knowledge on basic things they can do to be better prepared to withstand those impacts that come not only from natural disasters, but now it seems increasingly from climate issues and also man-made issues that continue to impact our communities. So I just wanted to make sure I put out that point that I think all of us have a responsibility from a collective standpoint to make sure that we do everything we can to prepare the next generation to be employable, to have skills that will make them and to build their community outlook and to make them good public citizens, to be engaged, to do the things like volunteering, to pay it forward, to help others. And I know all the partners on this call, many of them from the nonprofit sector, that's what you do in your communities, and we applaud the work that you do as well.
Hey, thanks a lot, Joe. I was jotting down some notes and anticipated the focus on generations. I think it's one of the big takeaways from your comments is that taking a longer term view, the role of long-term resilience, long-term community focus, what the economic picture is, and then also society as well. Harumi, I'd like to pivot to you and just to again continue the narrative on long-term focus on disasters and economic sustainability. It's really made of many different components. One that we've heard of recently is quite a bit about loneliness as a key community challenge and resiliency. Harumi, can you share some of the work that you've done, particularly with children in combating the effects of loneliness?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Since our foundation in 2006, we've always supported children's homes for children to have touching points outside of their homes or schools. We want the children to build trust with volunteers. And you know that you are aware that 70% of the children living in children's home nowadays have had severe experience of abuse and neglect from their own parents. And so they are very, very weak, basically. And we believe that the relationship with the volunteers, good volunteers, is something that they can just build upon, and it's very important for their self-sustainability later on. And during COVID, we through children's homes, we were asked to just provide care packages because many of their graduates were suffering with poverty at that time. And we've been able to do that only because we've built up good relationship with the children and also children's homes. And I think it's really the key, as Joe and Cordita has been repeating. And we've not only giving them material assistance, we are gradually shifting to provide more skill-based programs for them to become sustainable and when they become independent. So self-sustainability and connected with community are the really key points, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a good reminder to always consider those that are most vulnerable, particularly children who are fragile and potentially can get onto a path of self-reliance and sustainability. Thanks for that. And switching gears just a little bit, we know disasters significantly impact low-income people. The aftermath of disasters contributes to new low-income populations. It doesn't necessarily help. The unpredictability of the natural disasters that are occurring, as I highlighted a few minutes ago, really exacerbates this challenge. It damages local economies. It disrupts supply chains. It makes communities more unstable. Joe, what do you see as the role of companies in this regard?
Yeah, Rob, that's a great question. So there's a couple of things. First of all, one of the things that in the aftermath of disasters, companies don't have to give all of their money for the immediate response. What we like to do in a lot of cases is we respond with like half of our resources up front, and then we'll also commit half of that for long-term recovery, because that's the donut hole. Most of the money is spent or given in the first 3 weeks after a disaster. 90% of the need is in the long-term recovery aspect. So we've surrounded ourselves with partners that are really focused on that speeding recovery. A couple of things that the foundation has supported, organizations like St. Bernard Project, which are working not only to rebuild homes quicker, but are working from a policy standpoint to change rules that makes it much easier for people who've been impacted that don't have the resources to file claims. They're actually providing support to people to actually appeal their FEMA claims, to make sure that they're using the best technology to be able to appropriately give them the amount of money that they're entitled to based on there's a wide discrepancy sometimes in the amount of claims given for very similar disasters in some of the low impact communities, just because of maybe the technology or unskilled volunteers who might be doing those assessments. But what's really key is that, UPS again has been and it is a front door community, meaning our people don't sit behind a desk. They are actually friends and neighbors. They see their neighbors every day. So in the aftermath of disasters, we are engaged with our volunteer opportunities. We're in those communities working day in and day out through our business resource groups are another great resource that makes a critical difference. And then our programs are designed to really try to create a level playing field and provide a focus on equity and justice, particularly in those communities that are under-resourced. One of the things that we support is our partners at Operation Hope, who actually provide financial recovery support to individuals in the community, small businesses, and our own employees. So when they're impacted, an Operation Hope counselor will talk to them about all the resources that are available to them. I know we have people from United Way on this call, the 211s. We've provided, probably over $1 billion in support to United Way over the last 38 years, and they provide fantastic resources. I think there's a real need in each community for all these partners who are here today to find a way to come together to create collective impact where we stop creating redundancies and look at what are the gaps in our community and who can best fill that gap and direct funds to where those gaps are. A perfect example for us in a barrier to economic sustainability is, in many cases, childcare. Getting back to work because you can't find anybody. The childcare industry is going through a great crisis. We've actually started to pilot childcare facilities at our facilities now, because we know with a huge part-time population of employees, that's critical to getting our people to work, keeping them and retaining those people so they can A, have an income to support their families, and B, become valid long-term employees. And for all of you who saw the news this year, I'll put it out there for any of you in any community, you can go from a part-timer at UPS in 4 years to becoming a driver, which we all learn, make $175,000 a year. We had more people look for UPSers, UPSjobs.com after our contract negotiation with the Teamsters this year. I think we broke the internet.
Thanks, Joe. I think a couple things just to reflect real quickly, just that you can't necessarily respond your way out of a disaster. You've got to make more holistic investments, thinking through the life cycle of disasters and weighing in where it makes sense for you. So you might have a lot of capability in response. That's great, but you may not. But you may actually have more resilience and capacity building capability as well, or programming opportunity too. And lastly, the role of financial well-being is also significantly important. Harumi, what are some ways that you've partnered with companies in Japan after a disaster?
Yeah, I was listening to Joe's and thought that we should have you here in Japan at the time of disaster. Let me just give you a few examples of our collaboration with corporate partners after the disaster. After the big earthquake and tsunami in Tohoku, we've collaborated with one Mori building, a landowner and developer. They gave us free space to just sort out all the donated items. And with Major League Baseball, they've supported our project to revitalize a baseball field for local children, for the local children team. And also sent their players to provide workshops. And with U.S. Embassy and U.S. Japan Council, they've supported us to invite the local baseball team to Tokyo and have the kids mingle with children living in Tokyo. And also during COVID, we've reached out to Bank of America for support, and they've immediately started food drive, and that's how we just quickly start up our food package programs. Just a few of our examples.
Yeah, I think one takeaway from what you shared is that you've got to think of the second and third order effects and also the opportunities, not only the second, third order effects of what happened, but the second and third order effects of what good you can do as you're leveraging your brand, your enterprise, your capability after disaster. Thank you. Kadira, Matterport has developed some technology to support communities following a disaster. And so we really would like for you to share some more about Matterport's work to use technology as a resource in building stronger communities.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, we use 3D technology, as I mentioned before, to enable anyone to turn a physical space into this immersive digital twin. And we're well known for our work in the real estate space. If you've ever looked at a home or an apartment virtually on your computer, Matterport likely was behind that technology to help bring that space to you. But we work with a number of industries, including customers like insurance companies, to aid in the restoration space or process. When I launched our social impact program, Exploration to Equity, I knew that this would be important to leverage our cameras and our platform to help strengthen under-resourced communities that are impacted by disasters. One of our first donations went to SBP, or St. Bernard Project. Joe mentioned them as well. But they're using our technology to help accelerate assessments as part of the FEMA appeal process in under-resourced communities. So we're really excited about that, to partner with them, and definitely look forward to supporting more disaster recovery and response organizations that are doing similar work and can use our technology. I think I have been fascinated and with Matterport and other roles as well, thinking about the role that technology can play in the disaster space and how significant it can be. So we know it can, it help increase speed and efficiency. There's some really rich storytelling and insights we can gain from data to inform our response approaches. So keep that in mind. Again, going back to kind of, you think about building that kind of multi-pronged approach with different stakeholders around the table. Think about how you could use technology to help in pre-stationing and tracking quantities of products in communities as part of your response, right? Or before the disaster even happens, how do you leverage that technology to track that? I've also worked with organizations where we've tracked the number of shelter beds available in real time, and technology played a key role in that. So there's so many ways that technology can help us. Again, as you think about who needs to come to your table and is going to help in providing this kind of comprehensive, multi-pronged approach to how we respond to communities, technology is definitely a game changer there.
And could I just ask just a quick follow-up, and that is, technology can be a real game changer depending upon the problem. Any takeaways on how to apply technology for those that are on the call based on your experience?
So I think what I always start with, again, is like, what are we trying to solve for? What role, again, could technology really play? So let's not, tech is the buzzword, and we know it can help, and we're starting to get into AI and all the things, right? When we talk about it, let's not just chase things to chase them. Again, really think about, when you're looking at who's coming to the table to support and provide solutions, think about the role that potentially technology could play. So again, I mentioned, for example, partnering with organizations. When we were working on response, we would think about the feeding and sheltering, right? That was a part of the response efforts. Well, how amazing would it be to know if we could pre-station supplies months ahead of a disaster and track quantities as we are starting to deplete those resources, right? So that was something that we were thinking about, again, understanding the needs of the community and what we were trying to solve for. So again, that goes back to what are you solving for? And more importantly, have you asked the community that you're going to be helping what they could need? From there, then you can start thinking about, okay, how could technology help us in speed, efficiency, et cetera?
Thanks. It's always helpful to know kind of what you're trying to solve for in order to craft a solution. Speaking of challenges and solutions, there are different geopolitical situations as well as disaster situations that are occurring that displace people and create refugee situations. Joe, I know UPS has been involved in this space. Could you share some perspective around those kinds of impacts and also the effects on long-term community sustainability as people are displaced by disasters of all kinds?
Yeah, Rob, we've been supporting global crises. There are more global crises going on today. We're seeing it firsthand unfold in the Middle East, but it's also happening here at home in the U.S. as we see, communities now having to figure out how to support increased communities that are across America. We've worked with many partners to provide support. We talk about technology. We work with many of our nonprofit partners like Salvation Army, who've helped on the border in Mexico and the U.S. Providing like intake technology. Started in Haiti after the earthquake, where we saw families fighting for meals, fighting for resources that were finite, and so we provided a way to eliminate the violence that was breaking out in some of these locations by using technology, giving everybody a lanyard so they could. We gave them to the mothers so that they could sign up and then swipe a badge, making sure they got everything they were supposed to get. And so those who were not able to aggressively get in there to get theirs were now able to get their share. But we've seen the increase in refugees. We've worked with organizations to where possible, where they meet all the requirements to hire refugees where we can, and also to provide those resources, because this is a growing challenge that all communities are right now dealing with. It's how are we going to expand our resources? We have communities that are now being seeing influx of additional refugees around the world, dealing with many of the how do we deal with the cultural differences? How do we address their basic needs? And then how do we integrate, where possible, those refugees into the community and help to create, again, sustainable economic situation for that community? It's really important, and I think it's one of those topics that we're going to see and need more collaboration in the future.
Thanks, Joe, for sharing that perspective. Harumi, from your standpoint, also interested in what HandsOn Tokyo is doing, and particularly the role in Ukrainian refugee resettlement. Can you tell us about some of your activities there?
Yes. So right after we had some evacuees from Ukraine, we hired one Ukrainian staff member to coordinate our program. And we just started few programs, including volunteer programs to teach them Japanese and English, and also connected them to our corporate partners to have some some jobs in Japan. And also, we've been organizing events for them to keep their own community and also to build, good relationship with volunteers and Japanese.
Thank you for that. We have a few more minutes remaining in our time this morning, and we've worked our way through, I think, some upfront framing on what each of the panelists has done, either as people or through their programs. And so we are going to have a few moments of dialogue with questions from the audience. I did place in the chat, we're not going to be able to get to all questions that are posted in the chat, but if you'd like to just post a question in the chat, I'd be happy to look at it. We do have some questions that were already shared pre our time today. I'll ask all three of you with some general questions. I think we're going to stay at that level and not really get too specific to geography. But one is around volunteers, and how do you effectively engage volunteers in your efforts, either in your current position or in your previous work? Joe,
Well,
I know that.
Oh,
Go ahead, Kabir.
no,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, I think, it's we don't state it enough how volunteers are really the lifeline, right? To those communities. And again, keep in mind that volunteers are usually of the community. Of course, there are times when a disaster is so significant that we are deploying and bringing volunteers in from outside of the community. But again, I think this is an opportunity for us to think about, if these folks are in and of the community and they're on the front lines, how rich they are in terms of knowledge and just understanding the needs. I think so that's one thing I would keep in mind. The other thing that I think that has been helpful when I've worked with partners around volunteer management and mobilization is think about the training. Again, think about all the work that we could be doing with our volunteers in Blue Sky, the training, helping them if they're not from the community, helping them to really learn the community and get connected. Also, I think what's really important, again, especially if your volunteers are not necessarily of that community, think about the cultural awareness and cultural competency trainings that can really help those volunteers connect with residents. So again, so many rich opportunities. I get really excited when I have the opportunity to work with volunteers because, again, they're going to be on the front lines of helping to get that community back on track.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I just say there's three ways that we engage. From a UPS leadership standpoint, we want our leaders to serve on boards, to add capacity to nonprofits. I think there's a lot of expertise and skill building that the private sector can add to nonprofits to strengthen their capacity. We have a commitment to volunteer 30 million hours by 2030, and we've already done 25 million. So UPSers understand the importance of being in the community to deliver what matters for the people who need it most. And so you'll find UPS brown shirts on every day. From a nonprofit perspective, understand that there are certain months they're called Global Volunteer Months in April, May. Those are opportunities for you to build those relationships. We also provide through a lot of private sector companies now use a platform where our employees, if they do so many hours, they can get money for the agency of their choice. And then finally, from a disaster standpoint, we leverage the skilled expertise of our logistics people, and they work with a lot of leading UN and international humanitarian agencies to help build their capacity on supply chain, We've deployed and embedded UPSers into organizations. In fact, one of our retirees just created a new foundation called Red Lightning, and it is creating a bench of ex-UPS supply chain people to go do health system strengthening work in middle and low income countries, and also support those agencies that need support. And Kadira mentioned technology earlier. In a lot of cases, what we're doing is figuring out ways to help those international agencies better track and keep up with their supplies so that they can feed and support and help more people in their capacity, because we need to grow this exponentially. We can't just say, hey, if I give you $100, I'm going to feed 100 people. If I give you $150 next year, you're going to feed 150. We need to somehow, through public-private partnerships, exponentially increase that ability to feed 3,000 people next year, because that's the need that we're seeing in the world today.
And just looking at the chat, going to try to summarize a couple of different topics here. And I think it comes down to community engagement and training. So, and there's a technology thread in both of those kind of questions. So when it comes to engaging the communities, what tips or what resources or what processes are helpful for engaging communities to provide the programming, Joe, that you were just talking about? That's the first question, and I'll get into more kind of a nuts and bolts technology question after this one.
Rob, could you rephrase that again? I'm sorry.
I think what I'm gathering is that because there's a number of different geographies that are mentioned here. Just in general, what's the best way to kind of develop that engagement strategy or that engagement plan? If you're going to meet people where they are, they're already maybe underserved or under-resourced, how do you effectively build an engagement plan so that your program is effective and when it's delivered? And I think, Kadira, you also, all three of you have, I think, talked about the importance of the community, how you engage the community. We're not going to be able to go really deep in the weeds on specific geographies, but certainly there's probably a good best practice or good practices on community engagement.
Well, I would say there's many different ways to look at this, but I would say if I'm a nonprofit and I'm trying to engage the private sector, I want to make sure that I clearly articulate what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there, and with our support. The other thing is, for those agencies trying to engage with private sector organizations, one of the best ways is to start with volunteerism, to engage the people who will then draw the organization into that organization as they demonstrate their proficiency and their impact in the community. And then being very intentional in narrowing your focus. We have to become very specific about what we're doing. Corporations are going through tough times with the global economic conditions, pressures to narrow the number of partners that we have and work with those that are the very best at what they do. So that would be the first thing: build that capacity so that you can demonstrate your impact, the outcomes that you're affecting, and then bringing a wide tent and looking for non-traditional partners, the technology. How are nonprofits, how is the private sector going to leverage AI so that you can do more with less and take care of some of the basic things that can be done through those? We believe AI will always have a human face. You can't just let AI go. But there are things that you can do to make yourself, with limited resources, more effective.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's so important. Again, I have my corporate funder hat on, but I'm also thinking about when I've been on the NGO side. And again, get really clear on what it is that you're trying to solve for, just as Joe said. And, you know, if you are focused, I saw one of the questions on, bringing resources around technology to, from an education standpoint. There are companies out there, they're likely focused on the resiliency or preparedness or recovery, right? And so if a company is focused, very, very laser focused on response, probably not going to be a good partner. But there absolutely are those companies, especially from a tech perspective, that's out there thinking about, again, in blue sky, how can we make sure that whether it's our seniors or folks who may not have phones or computers at home are prepared so that once a disaster does hit, they're able to get back on their feet faster. So it does require a little bit of, again, conversation, understanding needs. What are you trying to solve for? What's your plan? But it's doable. But again, you just got to be really laser focused on what it is you're trying to solve for.
Thanks, Kadira. That was actually the other question I was going to pose, so I don't have to actually ask that one. I think one other question I saw that was submitted ahead here, but also looking at the list of those that have registered. Some people are new to the disaster resilience space, and there certainly is a growing community of people that are addressing these either pre-existing conditions to build some capacity and resilience for disaster, but also helping in response and recovery. What are some words of wisdom for those that are new to this space? Are there resources available or lessons learned that you have that might be helpful for those that are just starting out in this endeavor?
Well, I would Points of Light is hosting this webinar, and I know at their annual conference they have a whole track on disaster resilience space. It's another a great resource to just dip your toe and learn about how others are supporting. U.S. Chamber Foundation has public-private partnership and resilience disaster conferences, as do many others. So those are some resources. There's a lot written on this in this space, and then benchmarking who are the best in this space, and look at those communities that have had those experiences with dealing with and recovering from major disasters, to talk to representatives of organizations in those spaces. Any of our nonprofit partners, organizations like St. Bernard Project, Salvation Army that deal with these, the American Red Cross, are all probably open to having those dialogues and talk about how they what they do, how you could plug into their network. All are looking at those really starting to target on socially vulnerable communities and how we take a look at the recovery space.
I would say, place equity at the center of your strategies. Involve the community that will likely be impacted at the start of your planning. Ask them, what do they need? How can you help? And then incorporate that into how you're thinking about the work. Now, I think the beauty and what's so amazing about NGOs is that y'all already get it. You already know that you're having those conversations. So I'm probably talking a little bit more to, corporate funders and our government entities, but across the board, we can't make assumptions. We can't take things for granted. As I've seen in some of the chat and some of the questions, right? Everyone doesn't have a phone, everyone doesn't have a computer, everyone doesn't have a couple $1,000 or a couple $100 sitting in an emergency fund that they can go and stay at a hotel if a hurricane is headed their way, right? And so really get to know the community and what they need. Again, especially because across the board, whether corporations or NGOs, whatever, resources are really tight. So if you get to the heart of that community and start talking to them first and start putting that in place as part of your strategy, it'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of reputational risk possibly for this going really wrong if you don't.
And Harumi, do you have any additional thoughts along those lines, or any for any of the panelists? What are the clear actions that you think or next steps that you'd recommend to everyone?
Yeah, an NGO, it is really important to reach out to the community and just keep the conversation going even before disasters. That's very important. We are the information platform. We should be, and also always talk to the corporate partners or any partners, so that the impact that they are thinking of. So it's just a matching process, I think, at the time of disaster.
Thank you. I want to give a huge thanks to our panelist, Rob, as our moderator. You all have given us so much to think about, to take back to our desks, to ask ourselves questions, and to begin to do some of this work or to continue to do this work. So a thank you to everyone, and a thank you to all of you all who joined us for today's conversation. We'll be sharing out a recording of today's conversation. And again, we just really appreciate all of our panelists and our moderator, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.